Alright, so what we do with what is the cost of goods manufactured? Well, the cost of goods manufactured are the cost of the completed items that happened during this period. In this case, it's for a year. So remember we had our key accounts that we were looking at the process of, we went from raw materials, taking out the raw materials, putting in the direct materials that we used during the period into the work in process account, adding the direct labor that happened during the period, and adding the overhead during the period. Adding all of that to whatever the beginning balance of work in process was. Well, essentially this report is doing the same thing, it's just in report format. This is going to help us figure out finally that cost of goods manufactured, that number that was transferred out of work in process into finished goods, so that we can finally figure out what was transferred out of finished goods to actually what was sold, using the information we have here. So what do we start with? Well, what did we have in work in process at the beginning of this, of 2008? Well, we go through, we find work in process inventory beginning 78,600. That's the beginning balance in work in process. What happens to the work in process account? What happens during 2008? We had some direct materials that were put into process. Well, how much direct materials were put in process? We don't have anywhere here that tells us exactly the direct materials that were put into process. So we've got to figure that out. So we do that by figuring out the direct materials inventory at the beginning of the period. Well, direct materials beginning, 68,000. We had available to us, beginning of 2008, $68,000 worth of direct materials inventory. What did we do during 2008? We purchased $568,000 worth of inventory. Okay, so direct materials that we had available to us during 2008 were that beginning balance plus what we purchased. Well, we had talked about last time that when we record inventory, what we pay to get that inventory to us is added to that cost of inventory. So the freight in on those raw materials that we purchased is part of the raw materials inventory. So we need to add that to that direct materials, that raw materials account. To get our total available raw materials, simply add up beginning balance plus what was added during the period, 666,000. So that's what we had available to us. We go and we can go and count how much inventory or value of inventory that's left. We find that our raw materials, our direct materials inventory ending balance was 76,000. So that means if we had available 666 and all we have left now at the end of the period is 76,000, we must have put $590,000 worth of raw materials into place during this period. Or in terms of T accounts, we took out of the raw materials inventory account $590,000, put that into work in process. The beginning balance of work in process, add to that the direct materials used, $590,000. The direct labor that we used during the period. Well, we go back here, and the only direct labor item we had was direct labor wages, $675,000. And then materials plus direct labor plus overhead. So how much overhead did we incur during this period? Well, that's why we went through and found all the overhead pieces last Thursday. Take all our overhead, everything that says overhead, add all the pieces up. You can always go back and check me on this, but if you add all of them up, it comes to $958,000. So in our work in process account, we added $590,000 for direct materials, $675,000 for direct labor, $958,000 for overhead. Physically, what happened during the year? Took raw materials of sugar, flour, and whatever else went into our tasty treats. Physically took $590,000 worth of that stuff out of the raw material storage, put it into wherever we make our tasty treats. Get the assembly line, the mixer, whatever. We also had then the workers putting the tasty treats together, earning $675,000 during this period. Pay it to them, sacrifice cash for it, so it's a cost. Went into making these tasty treats. In addition, we had supporting activities, support the factory, support production, we had the factory security guard, we had the production supervisor, we had some indirect materials, we had the rent on the equipment, we had the depreciation on the plant and equipment, all that to support making of these tasty treats. All this went into making however many tasty treats that we made. We're not worried about that yet. Just looking at total. So, total manufacturing costs added, the direct materials, direct labor plus overhead, the total cost added during this period, $2,223,000. How much cost went into making these tasty treats? So we added to our working process. So together, we had available to finish the beginning balance, that $78,600 worth of tasty treats that were on the assembly line, the end of last year that we had to finish up this year, plus the additional $2,223,000 worth of tasty treats that we put into process this period, meaning that we had $2,301,600 worth of tasty treats that we could finish during this year. Or it's also known as the total cost we need to account for. Where is this $2,301,600 tasty treats? Are they still in the assembly line, or have they left the assembly line? Well, we go, and in later chapters 6, 7, we'll figure out how we match up with the physical quantity that's still in our assembly line to the cost. But for now, we're told that work in process ending balance was $49,000. Well, if we still have $49,000 worth of tasty treats on the assembly line, the rest must have been finished. So during this time, we transferred $2,252,600 worth of tasty treats off the assembly line into finished goods. That's the cost of goods manufactured.